Stop the world!
I think the challenges we face, and we only need to look at this morning's news to see how complex and complicated the world has become, and the sorts of challenges and threats that are posed to the sort of international order, I think are at a level that I've really not seen at any part of my career.
Welcome to another edition of Stop the World. I'm Justin Bassing.
And I'm Olivia Nelson.
Today, we're delighted to bring you a conversation with the Commander of the United Kingdom's Strategic Command, General Sir Jim Hockenhull.
General Hockenhull speaks with ASPI's Dr. Malcolm Davis, Senior Defence Analyst, and Dr. Cathy Moloney, Deputy Director of Defence Strategy and National Security here at ASPI.
And Liv, it's a timely conversation ahead of the planned release of the UK's Strategic Defence Review next year. Not to be confused with Australia's Defence Strategic Review, though I'm sure the strategic context will be similar. And indeed, General Hockenhull discusses the similarities between the UK and Australian reviews and the key challenges the UK is seeking to address.
They also explore how the UK and Australia can work together to strengthen deterrence and address shared challenges, as well as the importance of creating a partnership that is truly integrated.
I think it's true that armies or navies or air forces may win battles, but it's not only nations that win wars, it's alliances and partnerships that win wars. So as a consequence, I think both inside defence forces, we need to become far more integrated.
As artificial intelligence, cyber and electronic warfare transform the military domain, General Hockenhull also highlights the role of AUKUS in achieving rapid progress in these areas.
It's a great conversation that covers a range of important topics. That's enough from us. Let's get into it.
General Hockenhull, it's really great to have you here at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute in Canberra. We are Australia's leading think tank on defence and national security, so it's perfectly appropriate to have someone of your stature come and talk to us about your field of work and your thoughts on security and defence. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Cathy Moloney, who is Deputy Director of Defence Strategy and National Security. Cathy.
Thanks. It's really lovely to have you here, and we'd just like to ask you a couple of framing questions to kick off the start of our podcast. Just in light of the UK Strategic Review, we'd just like to start with the question of what do you think the UK's key challenges and questions were being addressed in your strategic review, and what do you think your main expectations are out of this?
Okay, well, firstly, thank you so much for the opportunity to engage today. I'm really delighted to be here. It's kind of fascinating times, and as I've gone round on engagements over the last few days, the sorts of challenges that Australia was looking at through its defence security reviews, defence strategic review, are kind of echoing through the sorts of challenges that we face in our review at the moment. Of course, we had a new government elected in July, and they very quickly directed that we'd have a strategic defence review and that would publish in the early part of next year. I think the challenges we face, and we only need to look at this morning's news to see how complex and complicated the world has become, and the sorts of challenges and threats that are posed to the sort of international order, I think are at a level that I've really not seen at any part of my career. And I have a career that stretches back to sort of the very end of the Cold War. And as a consequence, I think it's important for all of us to really think hard about how we are going to address those challenges, and imagining that we can just keep doing the same things that we've done previously, and that somehow they will be able to automatically adapt and be endlessly adaptable to suit a different set of challenges, I think is folly. So I think that the challenges that we face inside the review are kind of multiple. The first is that the diversity of challenges and threats means that we need to work out very clearly how we are able to deal with sort of proximate and acute threats, such as Russia in the Euro-Atlantic, but how do we balance that with our responsibilities more globally? And that is, I think, going to be a set of interesting challenges as we go through the analysis, which we're still in a very early stage of, to work out exactly how the UK provides that balance. And at the very heart of this, I think, is about how we utilize partnerships fundamentally differently. I mean, it's one of the reasons that sort of I'm here this week to talk with partners about how we can work collectively and collaboratively. But my sense is the distinction between those that challenge us and those that threaten us, and the difference between us is that we have friendships and partnerships, and that it's that power of combinations that I think gives us the advantage against those that seek to undermine the world order, that provide acute threats. And as a consequence, I think what we've really got to do in our review is to make sure that it's a kind of outward-facing review. We've employed an external review team in the same way that the Defence Strategic Review in Australia did, and they're very keen to make sure they're listening to lots of voices. Of course, they want contributions from inside defence, but they want to listen to not just the sort of UK elements, but they've reached out and asked for international partners to give views as well. And I think that the challenge we've got to make sure is that we're kind of really open-minded and widely engaged, and we try to look at problems from multiple perspectives rather than just a narrow view.
You've raised something there that sort of piqued my interest about having an external team come in to do your review. And when you've had more contributions to that, two things that have sort of sprung from me here is, because you've said there's new challenges, there's clear strategic threats in the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic. One question I have for you is, how best do you think the UK and Australia can work together, as you've just raised, strengthening deterrence in these areas? My second question after that would be implementing your review, and where you think, as you in command, how do you feel that the review will help your command evolve to these new threats, and including your role in the joint force and the implementation of these things?
On the first question around how I think we're going to work more closely between the UK and Australia, I think really there's a sort of concept, I think, more of kind of integrated deterrence. So how do we make sure that if our strength is our partnership, how do we make sure that we get a sort of compound effect of our activity? So I think it's really beholden upon us to coordinate and collaborate at every level, whether that's in capability development, and we're seeing that through AUKUS, and I'm sure we'll come on to AUKUS, but also in terms of how we operate our force, how we think about our force. We've had generations of very close working in intelligence sharing within the Five Eyes construct, and what we need to make sure is that we're able to kind of to operationalize that relationship in a fundamentally different way. And I think we'll see some of that when the Carrier Strike Group returns to the region next year. And I think that's a sort of one of those examples of showing how we can really integrate our capability together, so that those that seek to challenge us or may at times threaten us, that when they look at our partnership, they see a partnership which is truly integrated and exerts a powerful deterrence message, and is able to make sure that we're able to kind of sustain the international order that we're seeking to protect. I think what that means internally for me in Strategic Command, I think the integration word is fundamental. All militaries traditionally have been built on sort of powerful army, navies, and air forces. And I think it's true that armies or navies or air forces may win battles, but it's not only nations that win wars, it's alliances and partnerships that win wars. So as a consequence, I think both inside defence forces, we need to become far more integrated. And the role of Strategic Command is really to bind UK defence together so that we're taking advantage of all domains of operation. So not just thinking of land, maritime and air, but we're exploiting cyberspace and we're exploiting the space domain in order to generate a more integrated capability. But it's not good enough to sort of stop at the boundary of a single nation's force. We need to do that with partners across government. So we need to do that with our intelligence agencies. We need to do that with industry. We should be reaching out to academia so that we've got new thinking coming into how we're working. But of course, you then also need to do that in big partnerships. And integration is hard. It's very, very easy to fall back into a kind of siloed way of working because it makes it really simple. If you've only got one thing to do and you put one person in command, and militaries love that structure where there's kind of great clarity of command and control. But I think we potentially have a future where we will be challenged by partners who have an ability to integrate their force because they run directed economies. They're able to give a great deal more direction, and that gives them some strength. It also gives them some inherent weaknesses. But our strength, I think, has got to become by kind of looking at how do we generate that integrated capability both within nations and across nations. And if we can do that, I think we show a capability to potential adversaries, which will certainly make them consider their actions on the basis of the combination of power that we provide. And I think as we do this in Europe through a NATO alliance, and crucially, I think for the UK, we really need to be doing that in partnership with Australia, where we have so many similarities and not a little differences, but we have so many similarities that it would be crass for us to think that we can't achieve that sort of integration. And I think by doing that together, we're able to provide a leadership role together in binding a broad coalition together. And we're so similar, whether it's in capabilities, in the way we're thinking about the challenges and threats, but also in the sort of scale of our militaries. You know, we all work very closely with the United States, but it's a factor above in terms of scale of their enterprise. I think we need to make sure that we don't do this in an exclusive way, but it's about kind of creating a really strong partnership, which then is able to work with a range of partners as well.
Thanks. There's a couple of things that really struck a chord here. When you're talking about the integrated deterrence terms, it's not just being integrated amongst our partners and allies, which is exactly what we need to be. I was really struck by you saying that it's not being siloed within the military, but using our intelligence, using academia. And that is something that Australia is really working hard to achieve, which is using all strength and all parts of national power.
You mentioned AUKUS. We've talked about new domains. I think I want to focus very much on the technical and the technological aspect of your work. Certainly from a modern multi-domain operations context, we operate in new operational domains in terms of space, cyberspace, as well as across the electromagnetic spectrum. And these are crucially important to how we undertake military operations. And when you look at AUKUS Pillar 2, the priority technology areas are all focused very much on these sorts of issues such as cyber, electronic warfare, and artificial intelligence. So my first question really is, how do you think artificial intelligence is going to be applied in future operations, particularly in the cyber domain, but also across the electromagnetic spectrum? And also my second question would be, what path should the UK and Australia take under AUKUS Pillar 2 to make rapid progress in these key areas such as cyber, AI, and electronic warfare?
You're absolutely right. The kind of premise of your question that this is fundamentally important, I think is often misunderstood. I think people are sometimes sort of dazzled by the technology and perhaps don't necessarily understand the technology. And I think that takes people sometimes to sort of two polar opposites. There are sort of deniers that think actually this is, in some way, it's all a con trick. And there are others who think it's sort of, going to provide a silver bullet, which is going to change the nature of military operations going forward. That the answer, of course, as in most things, is somewhere between those two poles. And maybe the answer moves between those two poles at various times. My sense is that often when we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about it in the sort of future tense. But it's here. Of course, it's going to continue to develop and the opportunities and its power will increase over time. But it's here and it's being used. And we're seeing active use in the context of military operations where the Ukrainian armed forces are exploiting artificial intelligence to increase the lethality of their operations. And I think so that there's two thoughts. The first is it's here and we need to recognize that we should be adopting and exploiting the opportunities. The other thought is that AI is not just going to transform what's happening in the military domain, but it's going to transform so much of our lives. And it would be absurd, I think, for the military to think in some way we were either immune or in some ways different. There is a view, I think, that in the 1960s, it was the kind of military industrial complex that was coming up with new ideas and inventing things which were then transforming the wider economy. And the role of DARPA in the United States is probably the most often quoted example, but there are many more. But in many ways, the AI revolution is being driven outside of the defense sphere. And therefore, it's for defense, I think it's how we kind of surf along those opportunities and how we're able to bring those into our work. Now, to me, the future is so much about the harnessing the power of data. And AI is going to give us the key to truly unlock that. I'm an intelligence officer by career, and an inability to be able to analyze all of the available information in order to come to the best determination has always frustrated me over the course of my career. We've had a series of systems which have meant that data is very siloed. Even if you can break that data out of silos, we didn't have the tools to be able to really extract the value from all of the information we had. So we used to talk about so much of our data sort of lying on the cutting room floor, which once we'd answered a particular question, we almost discarded all of that data, and we didn't have the capacity to really analyze. And I think AI is going to enable us to really unlock the power of that data. And that's going to change our decision-making in so many ways. If I take one example, the targeting enterprises that we run, whether that's for striking targets with a kinetic effect, or whether that's an information effect or a cyber effect, that the opportunity to improve the precision, to improve the lethality, I think it will also give us the opportunity to make up for some of our mass challenges. So the fact that we have, armed forces which are of finite size, I think AI is going to give us the opportunity to generate disproportionate effect from the capabilities that we have. And it's a multiplier. And there are lots of other things we need to attend to, the ethics of AI, the reliability of algorithms, and making sure that we can assure ourselves as we bring them into processes that we're really clear about what we're doing and how we're doing our work. But it would be folly. There's an old story of an English king, King Canute, sat in a chair ordering the sea to retreat because he was an all-powerful king. And of course, it ends up with the water lapping over his feet and then him being covered by the incoming tide. And I think we need to make sure that we're open to opportunity, and we're really open to exploit the potential power and even the power that we see already that AI is going to offer to us.
We only have limited time, so I'll move on to my next question, which is about AUKUS Pillar 2 once again. It exploits a number of key technology priority areas, including advanced undersea warfare, autonomous systems, hypersonics, counter-hypersonics, and quantum technology, as well as AI, electronic warfare, and cyber. But the key prerequisite for progress in these areas is building situational awareness that is pervasive and resilient in the face of the sorts of threats we're now facing with China's anti-access and air denial capabilities, and also the PLA's system destruction warfare capabilities. So how do you think the Five Eyes might work together to enhance resilience of critical situational awareness and information superiority when they're faced by these sorts of threats in a multi-domain environment?
So I think there are a couple of thoughts. The first is about making sure that we've got the sufficiently robust connectivity at all levels of classification, which give us the opportunity to harness our collective insight and enable true collaborative working. And that takes us through at levels of classification at top secret and at secret, of adopting appropriate cloud architectures, which are going to enable us to work in a truly integrated way. In some areas, we've done this for a long period of time, not necessarily using cloud, but operating in an integrated manner. So if I take the example of our geospatial intelligence work, there's long been a process of sort of follow the sun, where you've got large sort of day working shifts. Of course, everyone's got a night shift, but the majority of people working during a day shift, and the ability to hand off work at the end of a working day from the Australian Geospatial Intelligence Organization to the UK geospatial operation, and that approach, which has been perhaps not overly enabled by technology over the years, but I think we've got an opportunity to truly transform our collaborative working and bringing the power of our different organizations, both in terms of our collection, but also the strength of an alliance is that you bring a variety of different perspectives to the analysis. So what you're looking for is, within that, you're looking for challenge and alternative views. And one of the great powers, I think, of operating, particularly at a Five Eyes level, is that you're able to get some differences of opinion. And those differences of opinion are the bits where you're then able to challenge yourselves how you work through. So the first thing is the kind of the underpinnings to make sure that we can exploit advanced technology to enhance and change how we do things. The second thing is we need to burn down what are, I think, largely 20th century processes and policies. We wrote policies on information sharing in the age of files and hard copy of papers. We need to truly update the way in which we're going to work to be in a very, very different environment, whether it's powered by AI technology or whether it's just working collaboratively, where instead of me releasing data to Australian partners, actually we're all going to be swimming in the data. And so that idea of ownership, I think, is going to be challenged in how we operate and collaborate together. And it's only by doing that, I think, that we're able to gain the sorts of advantage that we need to be able to counter anti-error access denial capability, kill webs, and all those sorts of approaches that potentially challenge us and may in time threaten us, being able to kind of unlock that key. And I think our ability to have strategic insight, but it's not just at the strategic level. We need that insight at the operational and tactical level. It's going to be seconds of advantage and maybe milliseconds of advantage that's going to enable us to do that. And so this is about making faster, better decisions at every level and being able to have sort of confidence. If I give you a single kind of tactical example, the idea of any sensor from any of our partners being able to pass data, which would then enable any effector, any weapon system or platform to exploit that data collected by another nation, to be confident, sufficiently confident in the veracity of that data and the way in which it's been analyzed, to make a decision on using a platform for attacking an adversary. We're going to have to get used to the fact that this truly is an integrated force, and we need our policies, our processes, and our technology to be able to enable a really very, very different way of warfare. And that idea of an integrated force, I think people underestimate what power that's going to give us, and maybe sometimes we underestimate some of the work we need to do to get there. But it's urgent, and it's the thing which is going to give us advantage.
You're obviously undertaking the strategic review now. Australia has the National Defence Strategy coming up in 2026. How do we align our defence policy planning processes better so we're not simply incrementing one after the other? Is there a case for, particularly within the Five Eyes, for aligned defence policy process where we're all working together to achieve this sort of integrated capability you're talking about?
I think that may be an ambition, maybe perhaps a little too far, because the rhythm of those reviews are dictated by political cycles rather than necessarily by the desires of officials and military figures. So within the constructs of AUKUS, where we've got a nation that has a 3-year cycle, a 4-year cycle, and a 5-year cycle, noting that, of course, in the 3 and 5-year cycle, that could be almost at any point, but if they run to term, then you end up in that sort of difference. So you could end up having different governments coming in with different priorities. So it would be aligning those processes would be difficult because, of course, we need to align our defence reviews with our spending reviews within our organisation. So we've got to align them to budgetary cycles. And we don't even all work to the same sort of annual cycle. We have different end of year and start of year approaches. So I think it would be difficult. So to me, the answer is less around aligning the process. It's more around aligning the thinking. And we've been really fortunate in the UK to have Stephen Smith, who's the High Commissioner in London, who of course was one of the leaders of the Defence Strategic Review and then the work on the NDS. We had Angus Houston come and visit recently, together with the Chief of the Defence Force was in London, and I had a session together with lots of other officials in London with them for a number of hours to understand not just what the Defence Strategic Review, we of course even in partnership we changed the words around
our acronyms, yes.
But what we were able to do was really get under the logic and the thinking and the approach that was adopted. I don't know if I need to reassure you or not, but the point of reassurance, I think, is that I've been struck by how much they rhyme with each other. They may not be exactly the same because, of course, people are starting in slightly different places, but we're certainly all playing the same tune. I think we're increasingly in harmony with each other. And that gives us the opportunity to then find those areas where we can not just collaborate, but where we can accelerate together. And I think that's the point to me, that as I started in a really, really kind of increasingly complex and in many ways an increasingly dangerous world, we need to both improve our ability to collaborate, but we've also got to go faster because those threats and challenges that we face are accelerating as well. And therefore, we should judge our success not by, are we better than we were together last year or the year before, but we judge our success against the challenges and threats that we face. And are we in a position to be able to deter those challenges? And if deterrence were to fail, are we in a position when we can prevail were there to be a conflict? And I think that's the challenge and the bar that we need to kind of hold ourselves against. So I'm reassured how close we are in partnership, but that's not good enough. What we've got to do is we've got to use that as a basis for going further and faster.
I agree.
You've drawn out so much that has been around the thinking of ASPI and ASPI's research for quite some time, and it's certainly a part of what the team that Malcolm and I are a part of, which is, defense strategy and national security. And we are continuously looking through lines of how we can collaborate, how we can do things better with our allies and partners. And I think we now have to really listen when we do have people like yourself come in and say that it's great to be reassured, but that is just the foundation. And we actually have to keep moving and we have to keep going, and we can't just keep sort of thinking just because we are thinking about these themes, that doesn't make it actionable if anything does happen. And as you said, to keep deterrence going or if deterrence fails. So I think you've just given us so much to think about here, and I can't wait to sort of mine you for more information. It's been really delightful, and thank you so much for coming to ASPI and speaking to us today.
Thank you very much. I think it's a really powerful part of our capability is the capacity that's generated by institutions like yours, where it provides both the opportunity for debate, but also provides some challenge. And I think that's a fundamentally important part. Also, it generates new ideas. And as I said, technology is being often led outside of the defense area. And my own concepts team won't thank me for saying, but often the ideas of how we think about the future, equally, many of those ideas are coming from outside the kind of the boundary of the national security community. And actually, that's a really important part. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity today.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
That's excellent. Thank you, sir.
Well, that's all we have time for today, folks. Thanks for listening to Stop the World. We'll be back again with another episode soon.